My name is Taryn Murphy. I'm a senior at Hillsdale College studying philosophy and religion, and it is my pleasure to welcome tonight's speaker. Robert Epstein is senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology and a former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today magazine. He earned his MA and PhD from Harvard University. Dr. Epstein has published more than 300 scientific and popular articles. His 2015 report in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on the search engine manipulation effect describes one of the largest effects ever discovered in the behavioral sciences. Dr. Epstein's research suggests that this invisible and dangerous search engine manipulation effect is currently determining the outcomes of upwards of 25% of the world's national elections, and that it is affecting a wide range of opinions, not just voting preferences. A frequent guest on Tucker Carlson Tonight and other television and radio shows, Dr. Epstein has published 15 books on artificial intelligence and other topics, including The Case Against Adolescence, Rediscovering the Adult in Every Teen, and Parsing the Turing Test, Philosophical and Methodological Issues in the Quest for the Thinking Computer. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Epstein.
Thank you, Taryn. I want to also thank a host of people. Matt, I think, is here. I'm not sure who else is here. There you are. But really, to be totally frank, totally honest, up until a few weeks ago, I'd never heard of Hillsdale College, and I feel terrible about that, but it's true. But you know, I've had a wonderful experience here so far. I've met some wonderful people. And it turns out that I went to a little Christian college just like this in Connecticut called Trinity College. A few mornings ago, I was awakened, because I live in California and that happens sometimes. I was awakened by a call from the East Coast. It was Tucker Carlson waking me up. And I was supposed to be on his show that evening, and I was on his show. But the point is, he was just calling to chat, which was great. And we ended up talking about Trinity College, because he went there too. And we traded stories about the college. So I do feel very much at home here. And again, I'm very, very grateful that you've allowed me to come and just share some of my thinking with you. Now, when I was having chats with people a few minutes ago, I met a very, very lovely, very charming, very witty woman whose name I will not betray. Hear that, Kathy? And just in passing, somehow or other, she mentioned that she uses Gmail, she uses Chrome, she uses Google.com, and I said at some point, do you know that Google has the equivalent of about 3 million pages of information about you? I don't think she believed me, but it's true. I need to try to get you all thinking a little bit differently today about Google and Facebook and in general the online tech companies now that surround our lives. And I'm going to tell you some things that are disturbing, maybe even a little scary. Now, if I don't scare you, if I don't really get you seriously thinking about these issues, then I've failed. So the point is, if you're feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe even a little afraid, by the end of my talk, I've succeeded. Now, I was called a couple of days ago by a Washington, D.C. attorney, quite prominent attorney, who told me that I should go into hiding, that she fears for my life. Why? Well, because the day before, 3 U.S. senators, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, and Ted Cruz, sent a letter to the CEO of Google, which was all about my 2020 election monitoring system and some of the things we found. Among other things, we found that at some point in time, Google's homepage had a Go Vote reminder on it. Probably some of you saw that. That homepage is seen in the United States 500 million times a day. So it wouldn't surprise me to know that some of you may have seen the Go Vote reminder. But we learned from the monitoring that we were doing, more about that in a few minutes, that that Go Vote reminder was going just to liberals. Now, think about that as a vote manipulation. Over time, if you're sending out reminders to, say, register to vote, or mail in your vote, or show up at the polls, just to members of one party, or just to supporters of one candidate, and you're doing that day after day, week after week, month after month, could that shift some votes? Well, it turns out it can not only shift votes, that's the kind of thing I study, I've been studying for almost 8 years. Over time, it can shift millions of votes. Maybe you're thinking, millions? How could it possibly? Well, because if you go back about 6 months before the election, any election, about 20% of the voting population, so in this case we're talking roughly 150 million voters, nearly turned out to vote, which was extraordinary. 20%, that's 30 million. Go back 6 months before an election, that's 30 million people are basically undecided, or at least uncommitted. They're vulnerable. They can be pushed one way or the other. Their thinking, their voting preferences can be altered. So if a company like Google is invisibly applying a little bit of pressure to some people but not others, what would be the cumulative impact over time? And I'm telling you, the numbers are simply stunning. Let me go back in time a bit. On January 1st, 2012, I received about 8 or 9 or 10 emails from Google saying that my website has been hacked and that they were blocking access to it. Well, everyone gets hacked. Google has been hacked. That's no big deal there. But I wondered, why was I hearing from Google? Who made them sheriff? Why wasn't I hearing from a government agency, a nonprofit organization? Why Google? And then as a programmer, and I've been one almost my whole life, I got curious about how exactly they were blocking access. They were blocking access, for example, on google.com. I get that, that's their own product. But they somehow were blocking access also on Firefox, the Firefox browser, which is run by a nonprofit organization. Somehow they were blocking access on Safari. Safari that's an Apple browser. How could Google do this? I got more and more curious about the company. I stopped looking at the company as just a cool company that gives me lots of free services. By the way, free my hiney. Okay, they're not free. And I started looking at the company more seriously. Toward the beginning of 2013, well, actually late 2012, I guess, I got interested in one particular issue, and that was bias in search results. Because there was a growing literature at that point, mainly among people who were business researchers, about the rankings in Google search results. Because obviously if you can push your company up a little bit higher, you can make a lot more money. It can make the difference between success or failure of a business. So there were people starting to study search results and their effects on people, and among other things, researchers were finding that people seem to trust high-ranking search results over lower ones, which is why 50% of all clicks go to the top 2 items, why 95% of all clicks go to the first page of search results. If you can't get your business onto the first page of Google search results, you have no business. So I got curious, and I asked, since I at this point was a little bit skeptical about the company anyway, I asked a simple question, which is, well, if people really like those high-ranking search results, could they be used to shift people's opinions on something? Maybe even their voting preferences. And so I conducted a randomized controlled experiment early 2013. I predicted that if we randomly assign people to different groups, in one group the search results favor candidate A, and we use, by the way, real candidates, real elections, real web pages. In another group, again, random assignment, people are seeing search results that favor candidate B, which means, again, a high-ranking search result links to a web page that makes that candidate look really, really good. And then there's a control group in the middle where the search results don't favor either candidate. I predicted that we could shift people's opinions about the candidates, people's voting preferences by 2 or 3%. In that first experiment, we got a shift of 48%. After one search, these were undecided voters, one search, 48% shift. In other words, that's like starting out with 100 people, and they're undecided, so basically if you ask them to right this minute to vote, you'd end up with a 50-50 split. But after that one search, it means that you can get people arbitrarily to shift one way or the other, creating a win margin for whichever candidate you want, a win margin of 48%. So I thought this was a mistake. We did another experiment. By the way, we're using real registered voters across the whole age range, not college sophomores. Second experiment, we got a 63% search. We noticed that some people seemed to be aware that they were seeing biased search results, so we decided to kind of mix it up a little bit, mask what we were doing. So in other words, the equivalent of having pro-Trump, Trump, Trump, and then throwing in a pro-Biden, and then Trump, Trump, Trump. Just mix it up a little bit, just to confuse people. And we found in the third experiment, we could shift an enormous number of votes with no one, not one person aware that they were seeing biased search results. So in other words, this effect, which we later called SEAM, the search engine manipulation effect, not only is it powerful, but you can use it in a way that makes it invisible to people. That's an extremely dangerous tool because it means you can shift the opinions, attitudes, beliefs, purchases, votes, well, in the case of Google, of billions of people with them having no idea that they've been manipulated. But it gets creepier. Much creepier. And that's why this attorney was warning me that she felt my life was in danger. Because we expanded the research to do a big nationwide study. And here we could look at a small group of people out of more than 2,000 people in 50 states who, for one reason or another, they could see there was bias. So that protected them from the manipulation, right? You're thinking if they can see the bias? No. They shifted even farther in the direction of the bias. So merely seeing the bias doesn't protect you from it. Why did they shift so far? Because people trust algorithmic output. They trust big companies like Google. And they're thinking, well, look, the algorithm is preferring this candidate. This candidate must be the best candidate. And there's another issue here that we eventually learned about. Let me put this in context for you. In 2018, a set of emails was leaked from Google to the Wall Street Journal. In the email exchange, in this leaked material, one Google employee is saying to others, now listen carefully for this important phrase, how can we use ephemeral experiences? Never forget that phrase, ephemeral experiences. How can we use ephemeral experiences to shift people's views about Trump's travel ban? I'm going to say it again. How can we use ephemeral experiences to shift people's views about Trump's travel ban? Wow, that just floored me when I saw that, because that's what I had been studying in laboratory experiments and online experiments already at that point for 5 years. Ephemeral experiences, what are they? Ephemeral experiences are experiences we have online in which we see some fleeting information, like search results, search suggestions, news feeds, targeted messages coming from, let's say, Facebook. That information has an impact on us, helps us decide where we're going to go on vacation or who we're going to vote for. And then it disappears, and it's gone forever. It's not stored anywhere. It's not preserved. In other words, you can't go back in time and see what search results people were shown. And here were Google employees saying, how can we use this type of experience, ephemeral experiences, to change people's views about Trump's travel ban? See the problem here? It means that people at the company are well aware of the power that they have to change people's views. That same year, 2018, an 8-minute video leaked from the company that was never, ever meant to be seen outside the company, called The Selfish Ledger. That video is about the power that Google has to re-engineer humanity, that's right from the film, according to, and I quote, company values. Re-engineer humanity. Lately, there have also been practically a flood, or at least a trickle, of whistleblowers coming from Google, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter. And what are the whistleblowers telling us? They're telling us that these companies have very strong political biases. Their biases are all in the same direction, and that they are using the technologies they control to engineer our votes. I testified before Congress about some of these issues in the summer of 2019, and I did some math before I had prepared my testimony, and I announced to the Senate committee that I was addressing, which was headed by Senator Ted Cruz, that if all these companies were leaning in the same direction in the 2020 election, they could shift 15 million votes with no one knowing that they had done so. Now let's think again about this important phrase, ephemeral experiences. When you're shifting opinions, attitudes, beliefs, etc., using ephemeral experiences, not only do people not know what you're doing, but there's a side benefit, which is that authorities cannot go back in time to see what you have done. In other words, you leave no paper trail. So now you have a tool, or maybe a set of tools, for shifting people's thinking and behavior, not just in the United States, but around the world. And you can be shifting thinking and behavior without anyone knowing what you're doing and without leaving a paper trail. Does Google and do these other companies actually do this? Well, of course, the whistleblowers are saying yes. There have also been leaks of not just emails, but documents and videos. They all suggest very strongly that, yes, these companies are doing this deliberately and systematically. But as a research scientist, I decided to explore the issue a different way. And this is going to bring us finally to that warning I received from that attorney. In the summer of 2015, I received a call from Jim Hood, who at that time was the Attorney General of Mississippi. He was up for re-election. He had sued Google, gone after Google, was very nervous, thinking that Google might somehow cost him the election, and he asked me whether or not Google could shift any votes away from him, and I said yes, and I explained exactly how. We had a great conversation. I'm still in touch with Jim, actually. He was out hunting the last time I talked to him on the phone. And then he said, but how would we know? How would we know that they're doing this? And we kind of got stuck. He said, well, in law enforcement, we would set up bots or sock puppets, fake people, and just see what they're being sent. I said, well, that won't work. I said, because Google has massive profiles on each and every one of us. They can easily distinguish a bot from a real person. And you need to know what they're showing real people. And then we got stuck again. How are you going to do that? Conversation ended that way, but I became obsessed with this idea. How was I going to look over the shoulders of a diverse group of American voters in the weeks or months leading up to election to see what these companies are showing people, and how could I preserve that information so I can analyze it? 2016 became the year of the monitoring system in my mind, because my staff and I worked like crazy, not knowing what we were doing. First of all, we had to work in secret. How do you raise funds to do a big project like this without being able to explain to people exactly what you're doing? And we didn't even know exactly what we were doing. We didn't know how to do this. We did raise funds. We did recruit people, ultimately 95 registered voters in 24 states, and we were able to preserve some of these ephemeral experiences, specifically 13,000 election-related searches on Google, Bing, and Yahoo. And our field agents, those 95 people, were using a special list of search terms, neutral search terms. That's extremely important, because they weren't typing in Trump is an idiot, because if you type in Trump is an idiot, of course you're going to get biased search results. Or Hillary Clinton is the devil. They were typing in things like Hillary Clinton health plan. Neutral search terms. That's what undecided voters type. What did we find? Well, again, we preserved 13,000 searches and about 98,000 web pages to which the search results linked. We analyzed the data looking for bias in those 10 search positions, and we found substantial pro-Clinton bias, and I supported Hillary Clinton, substantial pro-Clinton bias on all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search results, but not on Bing or Yahoo. At this point, this is 2016, from the experiments I'd been running now for years, I could calculate from that level of bias, if it had been present nationwide, how many votes that would have shifted over time to Hillary Clinton, and it would have shifted somewhere between, okay, now I know there's someone here who could shout out the number. 2.6. Yeah. Between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary Clinton with no one knowing. Senator Cruz got very interested in this issue, that's for sure. And some other members of Congress and other AGs. I've been in touch with lots of interesting people over the years. And the point is that we found a way. We found a way to preserve ephemeral experiences. 2018, midterms, we set up a somewhat more ambitious system. We had 160 field agents, preserved almost 400,000 web pages. Again, found very strong liberal bias on Google, but not the other search engines, enough to have shifted upwards of 78.2 million votes to liberal candidates nationwide. Now, that would have been spread across hundreds of races. Sounds like an impossible number, but again, it's spread across many races. And then there's this year. This year, we were able to recruit, in secret, 733 field agents, and this year we deliberately recruited just in 3 key swing states, Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina. We preserved more than 500,000 ephemeral experiences on Google, Bing, Yahoo, the Google homepage, YouTube, and Facebook. Did we find anything interesting? Well, this is a tremendous amount of data. It will actually take us months to really find out what's in the data. But we did find, once again, very strong pro-Biden bias on Google, but not Bing or Yahoo. That's important for comparison purposes. It's very important. And we also found, among other things, a smoking gun. We found that in the days leading up to the election, the Go Vote reminder on Google's homepage was being sent only to our liberal field agents. Our conservative field agents did not get a single Go Vote reminder from Google. Not one. On Thursday, October 29th, just a few days ago, I decided we needed to go public with this because there's still a few days left. Maybe we could get Google to back off on something. And so I communicated with a reporter from the New York Post. Her name is Ebony Bowden. I'm not going to hide this because it's public. You'll see why in just a minute. And I sent her a bunch of data, a bunch of numbers, and explained how the whole thing worked, and she wrote a fantastic piece, which was about evidence of possible widespread vote rigging by tech companies. And Thursday night, the 29th, 2 things happened. Number 1, her piece got pulled. The New York Post pulled her article. Why? Is it relevant that the New York Post gets 32% of its traffic online from Google? They went up against Twitter just a few weeks before that, but Twitter only sends them 5% of their traffic. If they were to risk offending Google with a story this big, Google could swat them like a fly, put them out of business in a heartbeat. There are companies all over the world every day that make decisions taking that possibility, that fear, into account. On the bright side, another thing happened that night, which my team and I were celebrating, let me tell you. That night, Google turned off the manipulation. They turned it off, like flipping a light switch. Starting at 11:57 p.m. that Thursday night, all 733 of our field agents were receiving the Go Vote reminder, and they did until the end of Election Day. They turned off the manipulation. I want to give you a chance to ask questions, so let me just try to wrap this up. Let me try to explain to you what I think is happening here, what I think you need to be aware of. First of all, there is simply no question. I don't care what lies the CEOs of these companies tell Congress when they're testifying. I don't care. There's overwhelming evidence that these companies are using the immense new powers they have to shift opinions, attitudes, beliefs, purchases, votes. They're using that power on a massive scale, and not just in the United States, but around the world. What happens to democracy if private companies that are not accountable to the public are using powers like this? Is there democracy? Of course not. There is no democracy. If companies are shifting votes and opinions on that scale, and you can't see what they're doing and they're not leaving a paper trail, democracy is an illusion. The free and fair election is gone. In 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who as a U.S. Army general had actually led the Allied forces in World War II. I mean, he was a highly placed member of the military establishment. He gave his farewell speech. This is 3 days before John F. Kennedy became president. But his farewell speech was not the usual, because the farewell speech is usually, these are all the great things I did for America. And American people are great people, and we have a great future coming. And no, that was not. I don't know who I was imitating there, by the way. Maybe you can tell me. He didn't do any of that. None of it. This military general issued warnings. This was a speech of warnings. He was warning about things that were happening in our country that could do tremendous damage, that could undermine democracy without us knowing that this has occurred. And he urged people to be vigilant, or this is going to happen and you won't even know it's happened. You won't even know it's happened. He warned about the rise of a military-industrial complex. Some of you may have heard that phrase. That's been repeated many times over the decades. But there was another warning in this speech that has been ignored. Eisenhower warned about the rise of a technological elite that could control public policy without us knowing. I've written up a paper for Hillsdale that I guess Hillsdale will publish somewhere. And my title in the paper is, "The Technological Elite Are Now in Control." I probably know more about that issue than anyone in the world. Maybe that's why that Washington, D.C. attorney called me. These senators are going to subpoena the CEO of Google. They're going to get him there and me there. They're going to say, Mr. Pichai, how do you explain Dr. Epstein's data? They're hoping to catch him in an outright lie so they can charge him with lying to Congress, which is a felony. What's his best protection to make sure that doesn't happen? Someone said something. Get rid of me. Yeah, if the witness doesn't show up, they're off the hook. Now, I've had all kinds of warnings like this over the years. This one scares me. I had a warning like this last summer from an attorney general, actually, who told me that he thought I would be killed in an accident, because I did a private briefing for some of the AGs, and he told me he thought I'd be killed in an accident within a few months. I wasn't, but my wife was. So, be concerned. Be afraid. Be aware. If you want more information about these issues, especially if you want to learn how to stop using Google, please go to myprivacytips.com. That's an article I wrote. It starts with the sentence, "I have not received a targeted ad on my computer or mobile phone since 2014. myprivacytips.com. And the other URL you should know is mygoogleresearch.com. And that has links to all kinds of articles and videos and appearances I've made on Mark Levin's show and Tucker and Glenn Beck and others. And it links to lots of articles that I've published as well, and articles about my work. So that's at mygoogleresearch.com. I won't hide this. It's also a fundraising link. But go there for the information. Go there for the information. If you were unaware of these issues before, be aware now and be afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Epstein. We now have time for some Q&A. If you would please make your way to the microphones.
Thank you very much, sir. I have two questions.
What is your name?
Tom Thompson, sir.
I can't even see. Oh, wait a minute. I thought you were Frank.
Well, that's my real name. This is an alias. In an age long gone, after the Korean War, we did a study on brainwashing Pavlov's dogs. My first question is, the results of that studies been available to and used by these big techs? And the second question is that in the studies, there were a few individuals who were immune or were able to resist the brainwashing. Has that carried over into any studies?
Those are two excellent questions. The folks that I know at these tech companies who've confided in me, they'll certainly admit that because they're interested in mind control, obviously, they've looked at every kind of project that's ever existed, in here, in the Soviet Union, and so on. So they've looked at everything. But what's actually happened, though, is that the internet has introduced new ways of influencing people that have never existed before in human history. So what they have learned over time is that they have access to new tools, completely new tools. SEAM is just the first one that we discovered, but we since have discovered and are studying, I think, almost a dozen techniques that you just can't see. Do you know that we can, just by manipulating those search suggestions that Google flashes at you when you start to type a search term, we can turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into a 90-10 split. with no one having the slightest idea they've been manipulated. And all we're doing is manipulating the search suggestions. Those answer boxes that they show you now at the top of the page that actually just answer your question, well, they also stop a lot of people from doing any searches, from doing any actual research. Do you know that roughly 50% of the searches on Google now do not end in a click? See what I mean by that? Do not end in a click, meaning they're just giving you an answer. And of course, this is true now with the personal assistants, with the Google Assistant, if you have an Android phone, which you should throw away. With the Google Home device, with the Nest thermostats. The Nest thermostat company, Google bought it about 5 years ago. The first thing they did was put a microphone into it without telling anyone. And the new Nest thermostats come with a microphone and a camera. Google has gotten patents issued in recent years on how to use sounds in a house to make accurate deductions about whether the kids are brushing their teeth enough, about how good the sex life is in the house, whether the parents need counseling, because all of that can be monetized. That's how Google makes its money. Google's full name, if you actually added all the words on that should be there, like Kentucky Fried Chicken, you know what they do. Apple computers, you know what they do. Google would be GSA, Google Surveillance and Advertising, because surveillance is what they do. All these platforms you use, like Gmail, Google Docs, they're surveillance platforms. That's all they are from a business perspective. They're tricks. You're being tricked into giving away massive amounts of personal information, which the company then monetizes. Google, surveillance, and advertising. So bottom line, Frank, or whatever your alias is, they don't need the old techniques. They have access to, I know of a dozen techniques, and probably they have far more that I just haven't stumbled onto yet, that are far, far, far more powerful than any that the US Army ever experimented with, that are far more invisible, and that don't leave paper trails. Someone else?
Question to your right.
All right. What is your name?
My name is Jaden.
David?
Jaden.
Again?
Jaden.
You know, I think it's the mask. How do you spell it?
Jadon.
Oh, Jaden. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. All 5 of my kids are J's.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming out today. I found your talk personally very informative. I had a question about the research that you said that you had conducted before. And my question is, how do you isolate the effects of Google having a go vote button or big tech manipulation from other kinds of real variables like shocks to the political system? For example, the Hunter Biden stories or different perceptions regarding Trump and COVID. How do you actually assign a weight to the big tech manipulation versus other variables that could be affecting voter choice?
A superb question. Thank you, Jaden. That's a superb question. The kinds of, the new forms of influence that we're studying are completely unlike the usual forms of influence. Why? Well, because if the New York Post runs a story about Hunter Biden, well, there's thousands of other media sources out there that are running their own stories or that are saying that story is no good. So it's like you put up your billboard, I put up my billboard. In other words, out there in the real world, information is competitive. It's a vast system of forms of influence that are competing with each other. The problem is that when Google uses a manipulation like targeted messaging on a massive scale, you can't compete. You can't even see what they're doing. You can't counteract what they're doing. And people trust them much more than they trust a newspaper report or radio show or television even, because with those kinds of sources, you can see what's called the human hand. But with algorithmic output, you can't. People trust algorithmic output because they think it's inherently impartial and objective. They don't see the human hand behind the computer output. They don't see the blacklists. They don't see the programmers. They don't see the modifications being made to the algorithms. Google's algorithm that we now know is modified more than 3,000 times a year. It's a completely different kind of influence. Again, invisible, non-competitive, can't counteract it. So, I'm not worried about probably most of the people here. You probably have a very strong political orientation or commitment. That's not the issue. The issue, it's not, you don't actually decide who wins a close election. It's the undecided people. It's the people who are not committed, who are vulnerable to being influenced. Those are the people that these companies are going after.
Question to the speakers to the left.
Thank you, Jaden, by the way. That's a really good question. What is your name?
Hi, I'm Caroline. Thanks for your talk. I wanted to ask about
You're welcome.
wanted to ask about the undecided voters. How many voters actually are undecided, and how do you know how widespread of an impact swaying undecided votes will actually have?
Well, political scientists have been studying that issue for many, many decades. And again, usually 6 months before an election, roughly 20% of the electorate is undecided, or at least they'll say they're undecided. That number goes down, obviously, the closer you get to an election. Believe it or not, in some elections, like a recent one in Israel, a lot of people walk into the voting booth still undecided. In a recent election in Israel, exit polls suggested that about 10% of the voters were undecided as they were walking in. So, it's something that's it's an issue you can study, and you can learn how very, very precisely to cause the kinds of shifts that you want to occur. Now, of course, the campaigns are doing that. Of course, they're trying to do it all the time, and they're using tech and other means, right, to do that. But that's okay. That's competitive. That's healthy in a democracy, that kind of competition for people's attention and people's minds. That's healthy. That's okay. But up here, if you've got some entity that people don't really understand very well, that's not accountable to the public, and that's capable of producing large-scale shifts in people's thinking and people's votes, that's extremely dangerous to a democracy. As I say, I think, frankly, we're past that point. In other words, I think the technological elite is in control right now. And let's see what happens if we do end up with a President Biden with all those investigations against Google that started up under Trump. Department of Justice, Federal Communications Commission, Federal Trade Commission, and so on. There's more than that. Will all of these investigations be shut down under Biden? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. In which case, for all intents and purposes, the power that these companies have will become permanent. Thank you, Caroline.
We have a question right here. My name's Riley. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us.
How do you spell that?
Riley.
Oh, Riley. Okay, got it.
My question is regarding the other companies that you mentioned using Bing and Yahoo as controls. To what degree should we be concerned about manipulation and control in these companies as well? And would using alternative search engines be a possible simple solution?
I use a search engine that you probably never heard of. It's called Swiss Cows. google.com. If you go to that article I mentioned that's at myprivacytips.com, you'll see Swiss cows listed, and you'll also see a link to all kinds of Google alternatives. But regarding Riley's question, I'm very concerned about Bing, which is, of course, owned by Microsoft. I'm very concerned about Yahoo. Why? Because Yahoo is no longer a real search engine. Do you know where Yahoo gets its search results from? Google. Bing, in early 2016, signed a secret pact with Google and dropped all of its lawsuits and complaints against Google around the world, withdrew its funding from organizations that had been trying to challenge Google in various ways. All the money was withdrawn by Microsoft. And Microsoft has been moving towards the business model that Google invented, which is called the surveillance business model. Windows 10 is a surveillance tool. If you have Windows 10, so yes, I'm very concerned because everyone's starting to imitate what Google invented. Thousands of companies. Because it's so easy. You've got tremendous amounts of information about your customers, right? Well, why not monetize it? And as soon as you ask that question and move in that direction, now you're moving to the surveillance business model, which means you trick people into giving up more and more information about themselves and their kids, and you monetize the information. That's what Google does.
Question to the speaker's left.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. My name is Ashton Harms, and I was just wondering...
Ashton?
Ashton, yes.
Hi, Ashton.
I was just wondering how much search engine bias is from Google versus individual sites utilizing SEO tactics.
Okay, so Ashton is asking about SEO, which stands for search engine optimization. If you have a company, small or large, you can go to an SEO company, and for a fee, they will try very, very hard to move you up a notch or two or three, depending how much money you have, in Google search results. And as I mentioned earlier, that's the difference between success or failure of a business in many cases. So it's worth spending the money. Well, if a private company, an SEO company, can move your company up a notch or two, isn't that just like what Google is doing when they kind of stack the deck in favor of one political party or one candidate? No, because SEO is competitive. All of your competitors in whatever industry you're in, they're all using SEO. You're competing. That's okay. That's capitalism. That's commerce. It's okay. But when the platform itself decides to support one cause or one candidate or one company, that's different. There's no way to counteract. You could pull out your phones right now. I know this is considered to be impolite in some settings, but it would actually, it would probably, if I haven't convinced you already that there's a problem, now or later, pull out your phone or go on your computer, go to Google, and this should be the last time you ever in your life use google.com, by the way. Go to google.com and just up in the search bar, type in A, just the letter A. Well, there's a very good chance that you're going to see what in the search suggestions that are flashed at you? What are you going to see? Someone said Amazon. Who said that? I can't see because of the lights, but yes, it's very likely you'll see Amazon. You might see Amazon, then Amazon Prime. Why are they pushing Amazon? Why do they want you to click on Amazon? Because Amazon is one of their largest, and at times is their largest advertiser. And not only that, Google is Amazon's largest single source of traffic. They have a business relationship. But what happens if you type just a G? Oh, come on. Well, you'll probably get you'll probably get, I'm guessing 5, 8, 10 suggestions that are all Google products. It's all Google. In other words, there's a lesson here. If you're going to start a new company, make sure it does not begin with the letter G, because you can't compete with that. See, that's what I mean. That's different than SEO. It's the platform itself exercising its ungodly, its obscene powers with no constraints, no laws, no regulations, the protections of the courts, which have said over and over again in court rulings, Google can show people whatever it wants to show people because it's just exercising its First Amendment right to free speech. When it removes you, as it did with Breitbart News, and I think there's some people here from Breitbart, when it removes you from search results or demotes you, which is more or less the same thing, and you're kind of dead, they're just exercising their right to free speech. Now, they've just taken away your right to free speech, but the courts over and over again have sided with these companies. You can do whatever you like. No constraints. Incredible arrogance.
Question to the speaker's left.
Thank you, Ashton.
What do you think we as consumers should do?
What is your name?
My name is Dorian.
Again?
Dorian.
Dorian. Wait, Dorian didn't...
D-O-R-I-A-N.
Yes. No, wait, Dorian Gray, isn't that about a painting and a...
What do you think
You're not that Dorian, are you?
No. What do you think we as consumers should do in order to, say, vote with our dollar for breaking up these monopolies? And what do you think regulatory bodies should do for breaking up the monopolies of search engines such as Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, and social media magnates? Now,
Dorian is obviously a very intelligent person who reads the news because he's said twice, breaking up these monopolies. Because right now, Department of Justice has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google, and that would seem to be their goal. 51 attorneys general have filed an antitrust action against Google, and that seems to be their goal too. And you know what? Breaking up these companies won't solve the problem. You know why? Because you can't break up the search engine itself. And you can't break up Facebook's social media platform. That would be like dividing up millions of families into pieces. And these companies know that. They can't wait. This is called regulatory capture, and I'm actually working on an article called Regulatory Capture and Other Games Big Tech Plays, because these companies are engineering these antitrust efforts. It's not the first time this has happened. They're engineering these efforts. Yeah, they're going to be forced, or they'll agree, to sell off some of the companies that they've purchased over the years. Google buys a company on average once a week. Oh yeah, they're going to be forced to sell off some, and so it's going to look like we've just broke them up. It's going to mean a windfall of possibly tens, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars going into the pockets of the major shareholders of these companies. And their power will not be diminished by a significant amount, not at all, maybe. Their power will not be diminished. The surveillance, the censorship, and the manipulation, the threats they pose to democracy and free speech, all of that will be virtually unaffected by any kind of breakup. You know, when you hear someone, I could name names, maybe I should name some names. When you see a public official saying, let's break up big tech, try to read between the lines, because I'm telling you, there's a very good chance, and I know of 2 cases where those people are getting money from Google, where Google is one of their major donors. Breaking up the companies, not going to solve the problem.
Thank you. We have time for one final question.
And what is your name?
My name is Kyla.
Hi, Kyla.
Hi. Thank you for coming out, and I just quickly wanted to say, too, that I appreciate your empirical and statistical approach to this issue. My question is, in your study, you found a significant political bias in Google, but not in platforms like Yahoo or Bing. But if these companies are, in the case of Yahoo, retrieving their results from Google, and in the case of Bing, moving towards Google's model of surveillance business practices, why do you think that there was not that bias found?
Well, obviously, they're all using their own algorithms to decide what to show us. So what we're seeing is evidence that Google's algorithm, its search algorithm, is programmed to show you bias of this sort. And one of the reports we've generated, and again, this is all preliminary, but one of the reports we generated, I mean, I did a double take when I looked at the screen, because our conservative field agents were getting search results that were more liberally biased than our liberal field agents were getting. Google normally explains any kind of apparent bias in search results by saying it's all user behavior. Users are just getting, what they want to see. Well, that doesn't explain our findings. Every single demographic group that we've looked at so far is getting significantly liberally biased search results on Google, not on Bing or Yahoo, including conservatives. How do you explain that by user behavior? In other words, it's the algorithm, and behind the algorithm, it's the people.
Thank you, Dr. Epstein.
Thank you, everyone.